I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. There's a battle brewing in Oregon over land use. It's pitting Governor Tina Kotek, along with the semiconductor industry, against those who love and want to preserve the open spaces of Oregon. It's a fascinating conflict that will be resolved one way or the other in the next 3 months or so. And it's our big story tonight. You've probably heard about the CHIPS Act, which is designed to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to America. Intel, Oregon's largest private employer, has already secured up to $8.5 billion in grants from the CHIPS Act, plus another $11 billion in loans. And yes, the company is facing hard times and layoffs right now, but that's a story for another day. You might have missed another part of the CHIPS Act, though. I certainly did. It's setting aside $5 billion to set up 3 hubs across the country to help push semiconductor innovation. Here's the announcement back in July. Take a look at those 3 bullet points. It shows that the federal government wants to build an administrative and design facility for tech, along with an extreme ultraviolet center and a prototyping and advanced packaging center. Okay, so there are 3 different centers in 3 locations, and guess what? Oregon seems to really be in the catbird seat for that extreme ultraviolet center, or EUV. Let's go back to that announcement when it talks about EUV. It notes that group running will initially obtain access to EUV lithography through an agreement with an existing facility because those machines cost an amazing amount of money. Now, there are a few tech companies in America that have these lithography machines, but earlier this year, Intel took delivery of the most advanced lithography machine on the planet. Outside of the company that made it, Intel has the only one so far, and it costs something like $380 million. The machine uses amazing physics to create ultraviolet light that allows microscopic etching on silicon wafers. It will allow Intel to make computer chips more sophisticated than anyone else is making anywhere else. By the way, you can find my story about the in-depth tour of the new machine on our KGW YouTube page. Okay, so that's why this is all such a big deal. Oregon doesn't have a pretty good shot at landing this site. Oregon has a great shot at landing this site. And yes, those are my words, but I mean, you don't have to take mine for it, although you should. Here's Governor Tina Kotek this past April talking about it.
Other states are a little jealous of what we've created here and why we are poised to be the place where that center should be. We have all the ingredients to be successful. World-class talent, leading-edge semiconductor company, strong partnerships with our higher education institutions, and the foundational support. These elements will propel us into the future, and we are sending a clear message to our friends in Washington, D.C. that we want that center here in Oregon.
Okay, so the federal government is going to spend a bunch of money to build a place that will be run as a public-private partnership focused on research and innovation for semiconductors, and Oregon wants one. But then the question becomes, where should it be built? And that, my friend, that is where things get a bit sticky. Let's take you to a map our team made today showing kind of where the facility would be built. The city of Hillsboro is eyeing this property east of Jackson School Road and south of Highway 26. The total size that the city wants made available for developments is 1,700 acres. But Governor Kotek last week moved to designate 373 acres there for the Federal Research Center. Like I said, we made this map giving you an idea of the location. The exact lines not exactly set in stone. An important note that this area is outside the urban growth boundary, so that's a huge deal. Now you might just be saying, hold on here. Oregon has strict land use laws. You cannot build things like that outside of the urban growth boundary. It's in state law. And you would be correct. But you would also be forgetting about the law approved by Oregon's legislature last winter that gave the governor a temporary superpower when it comes to doing things just like this. Last year, Governor Tina Kotek signed Senate Bill 4 into law. It offered incentives to grow the semiconductor industry here in Oregon, but it also included a controversial change to land use law, the biggest change in over 50 years. Under Senate Bill 4, Kotek was granted the ability to issue an executive order and move a plot of land that's outside the urban growth boundary into the boundary. There are some restrictions. She'll only be able to do that with sites up to 8 sites, 2 that have to be any size larger than 500 acres and 6 that are up to 500 acres. Any site that she chooses has to be within 3 miles of the existing urban growth boundary. And the governor must also hold one public meeting near the site before bringing it into the urban growth boundary and take comments for 20 days. Now, that hearing is already set. It's going to be on October 10th at the Hillsboro Civic Center at 6 p.m. You can check out our story online at kgw.com for a virtual link or instructions on how you can sign up to testify. Now, that superpower also comes with a time limit. Governor Kotek will only have until the end of 2024 to change urban growth boundaries. So, you know, the clock's ticking. In the meantime, the Economic and Community Development Director for Hillsboro says that site is a perfect location.
The lands that are near Hillsboro are lands that we have been planning in partnership with many other peer utilities and government agencies, really going back to the mid-2000s. It was land that was explicitly identified in part of the Oregon legislature's Senate Bill 4 conversations and identified as eligible lands for the governor's use in this executive authority. It becomes important because it's immediately proximate to the existing industry concentration and based here in the Silicon Forest. It also is immediately adjacent to industrial scale and world-class infrastructure like for water and sewer and transportation.
He also points out that the land is not irrigated farmland. Dry land farming is done in that area, and that the owners who own that property, well, they're willing to sell. But of course, not everyone agrees that it's the perfect site. For example, the powerful conservation group 1,000 Friends of Oregon, they plan to fight this move.
Our main point is this is an exciting opportunity for Oregon, but we don't need to sacrifice some of the best farmland in the world in order to site this. We have industrial lands inside the cities, in the metro region, in the Willamette Valley, and throughout the state that are already zoned for industrial use in large parcels and that are ready to go for this type of facility.
By the way, Mary Kyle there points out that the governor has not made the final decision on this yet. That won't happen until after the public meeting. But if I was a betting man, I'd bet it's going to be approved. And then we will wait to see what the federal government decides for that possible extreme ultraviolet center coming to town. In the meantime, what do you think about this? Are you okay with this limited expansion of the growth boundary to attract new investment? Or should the governor consider some other location? We would love to hear from you. Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com. Or you could call and leave a voicemail. The phone number is 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Let's move on to an update now on the big mishap at the Oregon DMV, where hundreds of non-U.S. citizens were mistakenly registered to vote under the motor voter law. Officials dug a little deeper, and it turns out the numbers are way higher than originally thought, although the number of those people who actually voted does remain very low. Earlier this month, we learned that 306 people mistakenly were registered to vote. The Oregon Department of Transportation investigated, and they found another 953 people who were registered when they should not have been. In total, 1,259 people were registered when they should not have been. 10 of those people actually voted, although ODOT now says at least one of those people was actually later found to be eligible to vote, so 9. This all happened because of the state's motor voter law. That means you're automatically registered to vote when you go into the DMV to get a new license or a license renewal or an ID. It also involves a law from 2019 that allows non-citizens to get driver's licenses. So how'd this happen? Well, the DMV says they've identified, quote, possible, though unlikely, causes for error, whatever that means. When their employees were choosing the type of identification documents that people brought in with them to receive whatever license they were trying to get. Apparently, in more than 1,200 cases, workers chose U.S. passport or U.S. birth certificate when in fact the documents were foreign passports or birth certificates. And when the system saw that it was U.S. documents that would indicate someone is a U.S. citizen, motor voter automatically registered, sent them off to the voting rolls. DMV now says they're changing up that process. Here's how they explained it today.
We've reordered that drop-down menu so that the U.S. passport isn't sort of the default selection. Secondly, for U.S. birth certificates, we now require that staff also enter the state and the county of birth. which is a second check that it is in fact a U.S. document. Third, and I think most importantly, we've added a daily quality check by the office manager to verify that on these kinds of transactions, that document entry matches what the document was that was presented.
DMV says there's no evidence right now that this was any kind of coordinated effort to undermine the voting system because the data is pretty spread out and random, but they are still investigating. The Secretary of State's office says the people who erroneously voted only represent 0.1% of the total voter registrations in Oregon, and they're confident it will not have any effect on the upcoming election. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek says she's directing the DMV to go above and beyond. She wants all staff retrained. She wants an after-action report within 2 weeks to explain what exactly went wrong and how it won't happen again. She's also demanding a full-scale data integrity review overseen by external experts. And she wants DMV to establish a data quality control calendar with the Secretary of State. Moving on again. Now, tonight, we're still awaiting decision from a federal judge here in Portland on whether the big grocery murder trial that took place downtown, how it's going to turn out. It lasted just over 3 weeks, wrapping up early last week. The government and grocery chains Kroger and Albertsons argued why or why not the largest grocer merger in the U.S. history should be allowed to move forward.
The FTC maintains that this merger is anti-competitive, it would be harmful to consumers, that a combined Kroger would raise prices, it would be bad for workers, they would lose bargaining leverage. And they drew on a lot of the testimony, especially from their own experts, which they say underscores all these points, and that they made their case. You know, the other side basically said what they had said at the beginning, which is that this will actually do the opposite. It will benefit consumers. They're going to invest $1 billion in price cuts and $1 billion in wages, and that they will be much better positioned to compete with Walmart and Amazon and Costco, and really be able to have that scale and efficiencies to be a much better competitor.
That's Elizabeth Hayes. She covered the trial for our news partner, the Portland Business Journal, and published this article this morning that we think is worth your time. You may be wondering why you should care about a big corporate merger, and the short answer is that it could have a major effect on your groceries and the price you pay for your groceries. If you eat food from a grocery store, that is, which, I'm guessing is just about all of us. And so this does matter. Elizabeth's article touches on a bunch of interesting moments from the trial, and we're not going to be able to get into all of them tonight, but we do encourage you to check out the full version of that at bizjournals.com/Portland. That's where you can find her article. All right, let's get to a few big points, though. First, how about this? Wall Street investment firms sent representatives to sit in on the trial to try and guess how Judge Adrian Nelson was going to rule. Turns out that Albertsons stock dropped 12% over the course of the trial, which Elizabeth reports shows that investors not all that confident that the merger is going to survive, even though the judge did not appear to be leaning one way or the other.
She said very little. During the trial, it is hard to get a read on how she's going to rule. But she said she would work very hard and expeditiously. She knows that everyone is anticipating, her decision, and she will rule when she rules. Only she can say when that will be. She said there really is no timetable here.
Good to be a judge, I guess. Judge Nelson was nominated by President Biden and confirmed by the Senate last year, so she's quite new to the federal bench. She previously did serve as an associate justice on the Oregon Supreme Court, notably as the first black woman in that role. Finally, the golden parachutes included in this $24.6 billion merger. The government attorneys used these to their advantage during the trial. How about this? $146 million would be spread among Albertsons' top 10 executives, but only if the deal closes. That includes $43 million for the current CEO, $50 million to the current chief operating officer. Those executives were asked about those figures during the trial. They both confirmed that, yeah, they're pretty accurate. So as we wait for a decision from Judge Nelson, here's what's on the line. The feds want a temporary injunction. If Nelson grants that pause, the Federal Trade Commission will then run the merger past an in-house administrative law judge. The companies do not want that. Their lawyers have said that in-house process almost always kills big mergers like this because of how long and clunky the process is. The deals simply fall apart amid the delay, they claim. If Nelson rejects the injunction, the merger will move forward. For now, there are still other lawsuits in Seattle and Denver challenging the merger, so we'll have some time before a final decision, but it's a case that is definitely worth following. You'll see it in the grocery store one way or another. By the way, there are a lot of juicy details in Elizabeth's article, including a section on deleted texts that we think is certain to raise your eyebrows. The article is behind a paywall, just so you know, but it's worth paying for. It's worth reading on bizjournals.com/Portland. Coming up next on the story, a homeless shelter in North Portland held a grand opening ceremony earlier this summer. Yay! It was complete with ribbon cutting. Only problem is nobody's used it since. Boo. The county says they're waiting on a permit from the city, and today Blair Best heard from the city's permitting office on the delay, and the answer she got will likely not surprise you. Details when the story returns. A North Portland homeless shelter is empty tonight, as it has been for months now, despite the fact that the county held a grand opening just 3 months ago. So what's the holdup? Well, it appears the delay is the county's own doing, or in this case, not doing, from a permitting perspective. Here's our Blair Best.
4 years ago, Multnomah County bought this empty store off North Lombard Street and Denver Avenue. It was briefly a severe weather shelter with the goal of making it a long-term homeless shelter for up to 120 people. The county even held a grand opening this past June. The county's website says the shelter is closed for renovations and will reopen as a permanent shelter in the summer of 2024. It's the end of September and still empty, having served no one since that June celebration.
It's stupid. I mean, it's supposed to be a shelter for people, but there's nobody there.
Ralph and his buddy stay at this homeless camp about a half-mile away.
I want to go there. I haven't seen anybody over there at all. The lights come on once in a while, that's about it.
In a statement sent to the Willamette Week, the county says it's waiting on the right permit from the city of Portland, which they hope to get this week. From there, it'll take a month for the shelter operator to move in. Meanwhile, neighbors are losing patience.
I think we need homeless shelters. We need to do something about the fact that there's encampments everywhere.
Well, it seems like if they wanted to expedite this, and if it was really a priority for the city, they would expedite those kind of permits, or they would have planned that farther ahead and not had a grand opening and kind of done a head fake on everybody.
County officials have said the shelter will open sometime in October, and the group that's running the site is meeting monthly with surrounding neighborhood associations to hear their concerns prior to that opening. Pat?
All right, Blair, what about the city's role in all this? Aren't they the ones who have to give the go-ahead to the county?
They do. So the city gives the county the permit it needs to run the shelter, and we heard back from the city today, and they say the ball is in the county's court. They're still waiting for more documents and for the county to schedule final inspections before the city can grant them that final permit. The city also stressed that they are being responsive and that they want to help the county quickly open this shelter, but again, they need to have those final inspections scheduled, and the county hasn't done that yet. And it takes 7 to 10 days for the city to review a permit after those inspections. So hopefully this happens soon. Pat?
Yeah, come on, gang. Let's work together and make this thing happen. Thanks for highlighting this for us, Blair. We appreciate it. Still to come on the story. Today, the state announced the rent increase cap for the year 2025. So for all of you renters out there, how much more should you expect to be paying next year? We'll also explain why not all rentals are covered by the cap when the story returns. This next story is one that could affect tens of thousands of people all across Oregon, namely you renters. The state of Oregon controls how much rents can be raised each year. Today, the state published the amount for 2025. It's 10%. That's the highest possible under Oregon law. It's important to note that this only applies to rental properties that are at least 15 years old. Landlords of rentals newer than 15 years old can still raise rent as much as they want. This issue goes back to 2019 when Oregon became the first state in the country to impose mandatory rent controls under Governor Kate Brown. It only allows for one rent increase in any 12-month period. That increase is calculated starting at 7% and then adding the percentage of inflation on top of that. Now, you remember headlines like this a few years ago with eye-popping rent jumps of more than 14%, which was calculated using the 7% plus inflation formula. So a lot of folks thought that was too high, and that changed last summer when Governor Kotek signed Senate Bill 611, which capped annual rent hikes at 10%. They still use the 7% plus inflation formula, I guess hoping maybe one day it'll be lower, but it can't go higher than 10% thanks to that new law. Here's a look at rent increases in units 15 years or older since the rent control law in 2019. It hovered between 9 and 10% for the first couple of years before that big jump in the first half of 2023. And then every year since then, we've been at that 10% cap, which will continue in 2025. I don't know if that's good news or bad news for your renters. 10% sounds high. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, well, that never ends. Straight Talk with Laurel Porter is coming your way next. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.